Hi, welcome back. Today I'm going to be working on a fairy tale diorama. My husband is planning on putting up a model train layout, and one of the things we want to do is an amusement park. So I'm going to make this little fairy tale section. And the first piece I'm going to do is this fairy tale cottage. To make this, I started off with a Schweppes tonic water bottle, a small one, cleaned and dried, and a piece of cardstock. This BOHS foam clay, this flowers mold, these, I guess they're, I'm using them for the wall, so textured molds, this little adorable fairy tale door, some Eileen's tacky glue, some Clabber Girl cornstarch for the molds, and Shutter Art acrylic paint in yellow and white and pink and sky blue and aqua green and chocolate and yellow ochre and green and red, purple. I used a lot of colors. And the last paint I used was the apple barrel black acrylic. I also used a little bit of hot glue. The first thing I did was just take the label off the bottle, and then I cut out a circle on the cardstock. I just used a bowl to make the circle and just cut it out. And then I'm going to cut out a part of the circle to make a cone for the roof of the fairy tale cottage. I've seen patterns online of how to cut a cone for different shapes and sizes of cones, but this one I just basically did what you see. I'm just testing it and cutting an approximate shape that turned out pretty much what I wanted. Once I have the shape cut, I'm going to pinch it a little at the top, and then I'm going to hot glue it together. So once the glue has dried, I'm going to make the next part, which is the shingles, and I'm going to make it out of foam clay. I ended up using this glass as my roller because I don't have a clay roller, and I tried a bunch of things, every basically round shape I had, and the glass actually seemed to work the best. But I just made a very thin layer, and then I am going to shape it using the clay tool and cut it so that it fits around the cylinder, and then I'm going to do a layer after layer of that to make it look just like shingles. And I used an X-Acto knife to cut the pieces that are going to go around. I used the round end to make the shingles, and then I used the square end to cut off the little pieces of clay in between. And eventually, I'm also going to use the X-Acto knife to cut the shingles out a little bit more in between. And the first thing I did was just stretch out this piece of clay around the bottom layer. I overlapped it so the shingles themselves were the whole way over the piece of cardstock. And then I'm going to use some of the tacky glue to glue the top around the top line on the cardstock. I used one of my older paintbrushes to brush on the glue, and I tried to make sure I got a nice layer of it in between the clay and the cardstock. And if there were any gaps, I smoothed the clay down and put a little more glue in them. This is my first time trying this, but I think it's going to look really cute. Once the first layer was on, I did exactly the same thing with the next layer, overlapping the first layer with the shingle part and trying to make the shingles themselves sort of offset from each other. Once I had a few more sets of shingles made, I wanted to try and see what the wall texture was going to look like, so I cut some of that out next. I have this textured wall mold, and I'm just going to use a smaller piece of the foam clay and make the squares. And then I'm going to make a whole bunch of those to put around the bottle itself. Realized at this point that I almost forgot the cornstarch, which is the key to using this clay in the molds without getting it stuck all over. So I also use another crappy brush to brush the cornstarch in to all the little spaces. I still have to be careful taking it out, but you can see it comes out a lot better. And I love the way the texture looks. Now, one thing about these little tiles is, while I do want the texture, it's not as vital as for some of the other kinds of detail work you might do. So you'll see I do a lot of squishing and smushing. And the theory that this is supposed to look like something at an amusement park, and sometimes they do a really good job and sometimes they don't. And I really want to have it as authentic looking as possible. I'm also going to make the door now because I want to make sure all these shapes fit together if I have to adjust them at all before I make a whole bunch of them. I'll put a link in the description to all the molds that I used. Almost everything else you can buy just about anywhere, but some of these molds seem pretty specialized, so I bought them all on Amazon. So I'm also going to use the tacky glue to glue these pieces onto the bottle. And for this piece over the door, I'm going to cut out a little triangular piece using the clay tool and just glue it over top of the door. Now, I'm not trying to get these clay pieces, I'll say, smushed up against each other. I'm gonna make it look like I'm gonna do mortar in between like bricks later with the paint. So I'm not as concerned about getting them exactly matched up, but I do kind of want them lined up a little bit. This is the first time I've done anything like this, and I think it's gonna turn out the way I'm picturing it in my mind, but definitely looks cool so far. And now I'm just going to keep doing more layers of shingles until I go all the way up to the top. And I'm going to leave about an inch that I'm just going to cover with a piece of clay to make like a top cap type of thing. And then I will make more of the wall tiles until I have enough to cover everything that's underneath the roof. To make the roof cap, all I really did was take a piece of clay and sort of push it down until it covered the last layer of shingles and tried not to poke the top of the cone through it. Here I'm just checking that I made enough tiles that the shingles will cover them, or the roof will cover them. So the next thing I'm going to do is make some embellishments with the clay. And the first bit is going to be I don't know what to call it, I guess a base, kind of a baseboard type of thing. It would be if you were making a building wherever you put the foundation. So I'm going to make a foundation out of this trim mold I have that looks a lot like it'll be made out of stones. And I'm just going to glue it all onto the bottom along the edge there with the tacky glue. then since it's a fairy cottage, the last thing I'm going to do with the clay is I'm going to add various flowers and leaves, and I have a mushroom mold, and I'm just going to make a few and glue them around the bottom and on the roof. Trying to be really careful because on the one hand I want them to stick, make sure the glue is sticking on, and on the other hand I don't want to lose any of the detail. So I let a little bit of an edge on each piece and use the paintbrush back top to actually push them on a little bit so I don't have my fingers smushing the details. I let the clay dry for about a day. That seems to be the recommended amount of time, and it will shrink a little bit, but since I have it glued on, it doesn't shrink enough to make it a difference to the way it's looking. And then I'm going to hot glue the roof onto the structure, and then just make sure it's stuck pretty good. And the next step is going to be painting. The two main colors I want to use on the structure are yellow for the roof and the joints, the mortar on the building, and then pink for the stones on the building. But I definitely want everything to be sort of pastel, so I'm mixing about 2 to 1 of white to yellow to make a much lighter yellow color. And then I'm just going to do a coat of this over all of the joints and the whole roof. So then I'm just going to take pink, not diluted with white, and do all of the stones, and then do some random shingles. So we're going to have it look very pastel, fairy tale, crazy shingles. So then I'm going to do some more random shingles with the sky blue and also with the aqua green. I also used a little bit of a bluish, sky blue, greenish color to make the windows and the door. I actually ended up putting 3 doors on because I thought that would be a little more whimsical. Next I took the chocolate color and I'm going to paint the doors chocolate. Now on the sides of the doors there are flowers and vines, and I'll use more appropriate colors for those, but I wanted to do the doors themselves with the chocolate, and then I'm going to do a layer of yellow ochre on them to give them a little highlight. So I also used the yellow ochre to dry brush a little bit of this darker color onto the roof and to the walls, because the intention is that it's really going to be outside. I mean, it won't, but it's supposed to look like it was outside. And of course, it's not going to be super clean. So I added a few little bits of yellow ochre and brown over different parts of it just to give it a little bit of aging. I also painted the roof cap yellow ochre. Then I took a very small brush and I'm going to use the green color to do the leaves and all of the little vines and leaves on the doors. Once I did all the green, I also used this very fine brush to do some red and purple flowers. And then I'll end up using some yellow to make the middles of the flowers. I mixed some of the chocolate with white to make sort of a tan color so I could paint the mushrooms, the tan color. So I also added a little bit of red on the dots so they looked a little bit like funky mushrooms. And I also used this tan color to add a little more sort of detailing on some of the joints and on the roof. Last of all, I mixed some white and black to make a gray color to paint the rocks that are the foundation. So I was going for a pretty light gray because I really want them to look like rocks. Once it dried, it looks like this. I think this will look awesome in our little amusement park, and it looks just like a fairy house that you might see in a real amusement park, I think. I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you so much for watching, and if you did, please make sure to like and subscribe. Bye!